The evacuation sirens had long since faded into the howling wind, leaving only the bitter silence of betrayal. Sierra pressed her back against the crystalline ice wall of the canyon, her silver skin already taking on the bluish tint of extreme cold. Above her, the last transport vessel became a bright speck against Thyria's pale green sky before vanishing entirely into the upper atmosphere. They were gone. All of them. Her mother's face flashed through her mind, that final look of anguish, mixed with resignation as the cargo door began to seal. "I'm sorry, my star," she'd whispered, barely audible over the rush of evacuating families. "You understand, don't you? The colony needs strong genetic lines. Your condition? It would only weaken us. Sarah's condition? That's what they called it. The genetic variants that made her bones slightly more fragile, her immune system marginally weaker. Never mind that she'd survived 18 cycles on this frozen world. Never mind that she could read the ice patterns better than anyone in her settlement, predict storms with uncanny accuracy, or navigate the labyrinthine canyons blindfolded. She was imperfect. And imperfect Keltharians didn't deserve a seat on the evacuation ships that the wind picked up, carrying ice crystals that stung her exposed face. Sierra wrapped her thermal cloak tighter, though she knew it wouldn't be enough. Thyria's night cycle would drop temperatures low enough to freeze even Keltharian blood within hours. She needed shelter, and quickly. Sierra pushed off from the wall and trudged deeper into the canyon. Her violet eyes, adapted to Thyria's dim light, easily picked out the path ahead. She'd explored these canyons since childhood, back when such adventures were merely games rather than desperate bids for survival. There was a cave system about half a kilometer south deep enough to protect her from the wind, narrow enough to trap what little heat her body generated. If she was going to die on this forsaken planet, at least she'd die out of the wind. That the ground trembled beneath her feet, that Sierra froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the ice wall to steady herself. Earthquakes were common on Thyria, but this felt different. The vibration was constant, growing stronger, accompanied by a sound like distant thunder. She looked up just in time to see it. A massive vessel, nothing like the sleek Keltharian transports, tore through the sky trailing fire and smoke. It was enormous, all hard angles and metal plating, clearly not designed for atmospheric flight. The ship was falling, and it was falling fast. Sierra watched in horrified fascination as the vessel attempted to level out, its engines sputtering and dying in sequence. It disappeared behind the northern canyon ridge with a sound like the world splitting open. The ground heaved, throwing Sierra to her knees. A moment later, a pillar of flame and smoke erupted into the sky. For several heartbeats, she could only stare. Then her survival instincts kicked in. Whatever that ship was, whoever was on it, they would need help. And if they were spacefaring, they might have communications equipment. Equipment that could reach her people, make them come back for her, make them see they'd made a terrible mistake. Sierra ran. The crash site was worse than she'd imagined. The ship, and she could see, now it was definitely alien in origin, had carved a burning trench through 300 meters of ice before slamming into a cluster of frozen boulders. Chunks of hull plating lay scattered across the landscape, still glowing red-hot. Small fires burned where fuel had ignited, sending up columns of toxic-looking smoke, and there were bodies. At least she thought they were bodies. They had the basic humanoid form: 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, but their proportions were strange. Taller than Keltharians, with skin in shades of brown and tan rather than silver. Several lay motionless in the snow, but others were moving. Sierra crouched behind an ice formation, watching as a group of the aliens stumbled from a torn opening in the ship's side. They were clearly disoriented, some injured, all of them dangerously underdressed for Thyria's climate. One figure stood out, a male, with dark hair plastered to his head, blood running from a cut above his eye. He was shouting something in a harsh, unfamiliar language. trying to organize the others. As Sira watched, one of the aliens, a female with yellow hair, collapsed face first into the snow and didn't get up. The dark-haired male rushed to her, checking for signs of life. His relief was visible, even from Sira's distance, when the woman stirred weakly. They were dying. These strange aliens had survived a catastrophic crash, only to freeze to death in South Kyria's unforgiving climate. Sira's hands trembled as she gripped the ice. Every survival instinct screamed at her to stay hidden. These beings were unknown, potentially dangerous. They might see her as a threat, or worse, as something to be studied and dissected. Her own people had abandoned her for being different. What would these aliens do? But she could see more of them now, at least 20 individuals struggling in the snow. Some were trying to pull equipment from the wreckage. Others simply sat, defeated, as hypothermia began its deadly work. She thought of her mother's face as the transport doors closed. She thought of all the settlers who'd known her since birth, who'd shared meals and celebrations with her family, who'd nonetheless voted to leave her behind. These aliens owed her nothing. But neither had they abandoned her. Sira took a deep breath of frigid air and stood. The moment she stepped into view, all activity ceased. 20 pairs of alien eyes locked onto her. Several reached for weapons, crude projectile devices holstered at their sides. The dark-haired leader moved forward, positioning himself between Sira and the injured. She raised her hands, palms forward, hoping the gesture translated across species. "Please," she said in Caltharian, knowing they couldn't understand, but praying her tone would convey her meaning. "I want to help." The leader said something sharp, his hand on his weapon. His eyes, she was startled to see they were gray. Like storm clouds, studied her with an intensity that made her want to flee. Instead, Sira pointed to the injured woman in the snow, then to the ship's wreckage, then swept her arm across the darkening sky. She shivered dramatically and wrapped her arms around herself, then pointed toward the canyon system behind her. Understanding flickered across the leader's face. He lowered his hand from his weapon and turned to bark orders at the others. They responded immediately, beginning to gather equipment and help the wounded to their feet. The leader approached Sira cautiously, stopping a few meters away. Up close, she could see he was shaking from cold despite his heavy clothing. "Thank you," he said in his alien tongue, the words meaningless, but the gratitude unmistakable. Sira nodded and gestured for them to follow. As she led the strange procession toward the caves, she caught the dark-haired leader watching her with something between suspicion and wonder. She understood the feeling. In the span of an hour, her world had transformed from a lonely death to something entirely uncertain. These aliens might be her salvation or her doom. Either way, she was no longer alone. The cave system proved larger than Jace Holloway had dared hope. As he helped the last of his crew through the narrow entrance, he couldn't shake the image of their silver-skinned savior disappearing into the darkness ahead, her violet eyes reflecting their emergency lights like a cat's. "Watch your head. Marcus," he called to the medics struggling with their supply packs. His own head throbbed where he'd cracked it against the console during the crash, but there wasn't time to worry about that now. Behind them, Thyria's night was falling fast, and with it came a cold that bit through their insulated suits like they were paper. The alien girl woman waded deeper in the cave, her slight frame barely visible in the gloom. She gestured emphatically, speaking in her musical, incomprehensible language. When they didn't immediately understand, she demonstrated instead, pulling at strange luminescent growths on the cave walls. They came away in her hands, glowing brighter once separated from their roots. Bioluminescent fungi, Enya Reeves breathed, her engineer's mind already cataloging. Incredible. The light output is remarkable for such a simple organism. The alien arranged the fungi along the walls, creating a soft perimeter of light. Then she moved to the cave entrance and began gathering what looked like large, waxy leaves from plants growing in the sheltered areas outside. She wove them together with surprising speed, creating a flexible barrier that she wedged into the entrance. The temperature change was immediate. Within minutes, the cave felt almost bearable. "Smart," Nina said appreciatively. "She's creating an airlock effect. Traps the heat we're generating while blocking the wind." Jace watched their rescuer work with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. 20 years in the colonial fleet had taught him that first contact situations were unpredictable at best, catastrophic at worst. Yet this young alien had shown them nothing but kindness, asking nothing in return, not why. The alien finished her barrier and turned to face them. In the gentle glow of the fungi, Jace could see her more clearly. She was humanoid enough that his brain wanted to classify her as simply different rather than alien. 2 arms, 2 legs, bilateral symmetry. But the differences were striking. Her skin had a metallic sheen, like polished silver. Her hair fell in white cascades that seemed to have an internal shimmer. Those violet eyes were larger than human norm. Set in a delicate face with high cheekbones and a pointed chin, she was, he realized with some discomfort, beautiful by almost any standard. "Does anyone have the translation software working?" Jace asked, not taking his eyes off their host. "Negative," Nina replied, shaking her head. Linguistic database was in the main computer core, which is currently scattered across half a kilometer of ice. The alien spoke again, her voice soft and melodic. She touched her chest. "Sira, that's her name," Marcus said excitedly. "Sira. She's introducing herself." Jace stepped forward slowly, mimicking her gesture. "Jace." He pointed to the others in turn. "Nina, Marcus." Sira's face transformed with a smile that seemed almost human. She repeated their names carefully, her accent turning them exotic. Jace, Nina, Marcus. Over the next hour, they established a fragile routine. Sira showed them how to arrange their survival blankets to maximize heat retention. She demonstrated which of the cave's fungi were edible, though the taste made Marcus gag spectacularly. She used gestures and drawings in the frost to explain the danger cycles. When the storms came, when predators hunted, when it was safe to venture outside, Jace found himself watching her more than was strictly necessary. The way she moved with economy and grace, never wasting energy. How her eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, alert for threats he couldn't perceive. The sadness that lingered in her expression when she thought no one was looking. "She was alone out here," Nina said quietly, appearing at his elbow. "Before we crashed. Look at her supplies enough for one person," hastily gathered. "And that cloak she's wearing is too thin for this climate. She's not equipped for long-term survival." "Maybe she's a scout," Marcus suggested, joining them. "Advanced party for a larger group?" "I don't think so." Jace watched Sira arrange fungi into some kind of pattern on the floor. "I think she was abandoned." The words hung heavy in the air. Nina's expression hardened. "What kind of people abandon a young girl on an ice planet?" "The kind we might have to negotiate with if we want off this rock," Jace said grimly. Sira looked up from her work and caught Jace staring. For a moment, their eyes met across the cave. He saw intelligence there, and pain, and something that might have been loneliness. She held his gaze for a heartbeat, longer than necessary, before returning to her task. But he could see the faint darkening of her silver skin, a blush, perhaps. The thought made him feel guilty. They'd just crashed on an alien planet. 17 of his crew were dead. Their survival was far from certain. The last thing he should be thinking about was how striking their rescuer's eyes were. "Get some rest, both of you," he ordered. "I'll take first watch." "Watch for what?" Marcus asked. "We're in a cave." "Sira keeps looking at the entrance," Jace replied. "Like she's expecting something." "I'd rather not be surprised." As the others settled in, Jace positioned himself near the cave mouth, his plasma pistol resting on his knee. Sira approached hesitantly, carrying one of the luminescent fungi. She sat nearby, not close enough to threaten, but near enough to share the light. For a long time, they sat in comfortable silence. Then Sira began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. Jace couldn't understand the words, but he understood the emotion behind them. She was telling him her story, he realized, sharing her pain with someone who couldn't judge, because he couldn't comprehend. He found himself responding in English, equally quiet, telling her about the colony mission, the pirate attack, the impossible choices he'd made during the crash. Who to save from the burning ship, who to leave behind. They talked for hours, neither understanding the other's words, but somehow communicating anyway. When Sira's eyes began to droop with exhaustion, Jace gestured for her to sleep. She hesitated, then curled up against the wall nearby, her trust implicit. Jace kept watch through the long night, listening to the wind howl outside their shelter. Somewhere in the darkness, various predators hunted. But here, in this cave, 21 survivors of different worlds had found temporary safety. And perhaps, he thought, watching Sira's peaceful face in the fungal glow, something more. The next few days established a rhythm. Mornings were spent salvaging what they could from the crash site, a dangerous task given the unstable ice and Thyria's unpredictable weather. Sira proved invaluable, reading the subtle signs in the air and ice that warned of incoming storms. She saved their lives twice, pulling them back to the cave just minutes before whiteouts hit that would have left them hopelessly lost. Ninia took to Sira immediately, her curious nature overcoming the language barrier. She'd pull out her personal tablet, one of the few pieces of technology to survive intact, and show Sira images from Earth. Oceans, forests, cities. Sira's eyes would widen with wonder at each new revelation, particularly the images of water in liquid form. She's never seen rain, Ninia realized. Her whole life on an ice planet. Jace, can you imagine? Marcus found common ground through medicine. When Sira showed him local plants with healing properties, he was fascinated. They developed a crude pictographic system for sharing knowledge, his tablet displaying human anatomy, her drawings showing Keltharian physiology. The similarities were remarkable, the differences enlightening. But it was Jace whom Sira gravitated toward in the quiet moments. When the others slept, they would sit together near the cave entrance, teaching each other words. Sky, he would say, pointing upward. Stars. Thyros, she would respond, her word for the planet. Lumine. Stars, he assumed. On the fourth night, as they worked on their makeshift lexicon, Sira suddenly grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her expression urgent. She pointed outside, and made a gesture Jace had learned meant danger. He immediately roused the others. Something's coming. Weapons ready. They didn't have long to wait. The sound came first, a huffing, snorting noise that echoed through the canyon. Then the footsteps, heavy enough to send small ice crystals raining from the cave ceiling. The creature that appeared at their barrier was massive. 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with thick white fur and 6 legs arranged in an insectoid pattern. Its head was dominated by a mouth full of crystalline teeth that caught the fungi light and reflected it like prisms. Don't move, Jace breathed. The creature sniffed at their barrier, its breath frosting in the already frigid air. One massive paw reached out, testing the woven leaves. Sira stood. Before Jace could stop her, she stepped forward and began to sing. The sound was unlike anything Jace had ever heard, haunting and beautiful, rising and falling in complex patterns that seemed to resonate with the ice itself. The creature's head tilted, its aggression fading into something like curiosity. Sira continued her song, slowly moving toward the barrier. The creature matched her movement, lowering its head until it was level with hers, only the woven leaves between them. She reached through the barrier and touched its snout. The creature rumbled a sound that Jace felt in his chest, then turned and lumbered away into the darkness. Sira sagged with relief, and Jace was there to catch her before she fell. She felt impossibly light in his arms, her silver skin warm against his hands. "You," he said softly, knowing she couldn't understand, but needing to say it anyway, "are the bravest person I've ever met." Sira looked up at him, her violet eyes luminous in the dim light. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw with wondering fingers. Then she spoke a single word in her language, soft and questioning. Jace didn't need a translator to understand. The question was written in her eyes, in the way her breath caught, in the infinitesimal movement that brought them closer together. He should pull away. There were 1,000 reasons why this was a terrible idea. They were different species. They couldn't even communicate properly. They were in a survival situation where emotions ran high and judgment failed. But her lips were a breath from his, and her eyes held such hope, such longing, that all his reasonable objections crumbled like ice in spring. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question asked and answered. Sira's lips were cooler than human standard, but soft, and when she sighed against his mouth, Jace felt something in his chest shift and resettle. A throat cleared loudly. They sprang apart to find Nina and Marcus studiously examining the cave ceiling. "So," Nina said conversationally, "Marcus and I were just discussing how we should probably scout for a route to higher ground tomorrow. Get a better view of the terrain. Radio signals and all that." "Right," Marcus added quickly. "Radio signals. Very important. We'll just go check our equipment. Over there. Far away from here." They fled to the far side of the cave, leaving Jace and Sira alone in mortified silence. Then Sira began to laugh, a sound like bells on wind, and Jace found himself joining her. When their laughter faded, he took her hand. She laced her fingers through his, the gesture unmistakably universal. They sat together through the rest of the night, not speaking, not needing to. Outside, Thyria's winds screamed and howled, but inside their shelter, warmth bloomed. Morning broke pale and cold across Thyria's ice fields. Jace stood at the cave entrance, studying the distant mountains through their salvaged binoculars. Somewhere in that frozen wilderness lay their only hope, the communications relay Sira had indicated during their halting, gesture-filled conversation the previous night. "You're sure about this?" Nina asked, checking her equipment for the 3rd time. "That's at least 3 days hard travel through unknown terrain." "She's sure." Jace watched Sira emerging from the cave, a pack of supplies strapped across her shoulders. She'd braided her white hair back, revealing the elegant lines of her neck and the determined set of her jaw. "And I trust her." Marcus adjusted his medical kit. "The others can maintain the base camp. We've got enough salvage supplies for 2 weeks. Maybe 3 if we're careful. If we're not back in 7 days," Jace began, "we activate the emergency beacon and pray someone friendly picks it up," Nina finished. "We know the drill, boss." Sira approached, touching Jace's arm lightly. She pointed north and held up 3 fingers. 3 days. She made a walking gesture, then a sleeping gesture, then pointed at the sun's position to indicate timing. "She's saying we need to move fast," Marcus translated unnecessarily. "Make the journey before the weather turns." Jace nodded. "Then let's move." The first day's trek was harder than Jace had anticipated. Thyria's ice was deceptive. What looked like solid ground often concealed crevasses or weak spots that could swallow a person whole. Sira moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent a lifetime learning the ice's moods. But even she proceeded with caution. They stopped frequently, not just for rest, but because Sira insisted on checking the route ahead. During one such pause, she created a crude map in the snow, showing them the path they needed to follow. When Nina pulled out her tablet to record it, Sira's eyes lit with fascination. "May I?" Nina asked, offering the device. Sira took it reverently, her fingers dancing across the screen. She pulled up Nina's star charts and pointed excitedly, indicating a cluster of stars. Then she gestured to herself. "That's her home system," Marcus breathed. "She's showing us where her people came from originally." Jace leaned over Sira's shoulder, close enough to feel her warmth. "How long have your people been on Thyria?" Sira seemed to understand the question's intent. She held up both hands, flashing all her fingers repeatedly. "Many generations," Jace interpreted. "Long enough to adapt, but not long enough to forget their origins. As they continued north, the landscape grew more treacherous. The ice formations rose higher, creating a maze of crystalline walls that caught the pale sunlight and fractured it into rainbows. Beautiful, but dangerous. The narrow passages funneled wind into howling corridors that sapped heat and strength. By late afternoon, Sira called a halt near a sheltered overhang. She indicated they would camp there for the night. While Marcus set up their heating unit, Nina and Jace helped Sira gather the large waxy leaves for their shelter barrier. "She's remarkable," Nina said quietly, watching Sira scale an ice wall with casual ease to reach a particularly large plant. "The way she navigates this planet, it's not just survival knowledge. It's artistry." "I know," Jace replied, unable to keep the warmth from his voice. Nina shot him a knowing look. "You've got it bad, boss." "It's not, we're just—" Jace stumbled over his words. "Save it." Nina grinned. "I've seen how she looks at you two. Like you hung the moon. Or whatever Thyria has instead of a moon." Sira dropped down beside them with an armful of leaves, her violet eyes curious at their conversation. Jace helped her arrange the foliage, their hands brushing with increasing frequency. Each touch sent warmth through him that had nothing to do with protection from the cold. That night, huddled in their makeshift shelter, Sira taught them more of her language. She would point to objects and speak their names in Caltharian, delighting when they repeated them back correctly. Cryos, ice. Venta, wind. Noxa, night. Then she pointed to Jace and said something soft, almost hesitant. Marcus, who'd been building a linguistic database on his tablet, frowned in concentration. I think that word means heart, or possibly warmth. The root seems similar to her word for fire." Sira's silver skin darkened with what Jace now recognized as a blush. She looked away, embarrassed at being so transparent. Jac touched her chin gently, turning her face back to his. "Sira," he said, then pointed to himself and repeated the word she'd used. Whatever it meant, he wanted her to know he felt it too. Her smile was radiant. They slept in shifts, 2 awake while 2 rested. During Jace's watch, Sarah remained awake with him, despite his gestures that she should sleep. They sat close together, sharing body heat, not speaking but communicating in the comfortable silence of growing intimacy. When something moved in the darkness beyond their shelter, Sira tensed. Jace raised his plasma pistol, but she pushed it gently down. Not a threat, then. She pulled aside the barrier slightly and made a soft, trilling sound. 3 small creatures bounded into their shelter quadrupedal, covered in white fur, with large eyes and rounded ears. They reminded Jace of Earth rabbits. If rabbits were the size of house cats and had 6 legs, Sira gathered them close, speaking softly in Caltharian. The creatures nuzzled against her, clearly familiar with her scent. "Pets?" Marcus whispered, fascinated. "Maybe," Jace replied. "Or maybe orphans she's been caring for." Sira fed the creatures some of the edible fungi, her expression softening with a maternal tenderness that made Jace's chest ache. She'd been alone on this planet, abandoned by her people. Yet she'd found room in her heart to care for these small lives, After the creatures left, hopping back into the night, Sira turned to Jace. She spoke in Keltharian, the words flowing like music, her expression earnest. Though he couldn't understand, he heard the emotion gratitude, yes, but also something deeper. She reached out and took his hand, pressing it against her chest. Her heart beat strong and fast beneath his palm. Jace pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her slender frame. She fit against him perfectly, as if they'd been designed for this. Her hair smelled like ice and something floral he couldn't identify. When she tilted her face up to his, the question in her eyes was clear. This time the kiss was not tentative. It was certain, a declaration. Sira's cool lips warmed under his, and when she sighed his name, Jace, it sounded like a prayer. They broke apart only when Nina cleared her throat diplomatically. Not that I'm complaining about the romance novel happening in real time, but Marcus and I could use some sleep. You two want to take watch together? Promise not to be distracted? We'll manage, Jace said, his voice rougher than intended as Nia and Marcus settled in. Jace and Sarah maintained their vigil. But now she sat within the circle of his arms, her head resting against his shoulder. They watched the strange aurora that painted Tharia's night sky sheets of purple and green light that danced between the stars. Lumine, Sira whispered, pointing at the lights. Beautiful, Jace replied. Then, daringly, he touched her face. Sira, beautiful. She understood. Her smile could have melted the ice around them. The second day brought challenges. A storm system moved in faster than Sira had predicted, forcing them to take shelter in a narrow ice cave, barely large enough for all four of them. They huddled together for warmth as wind speeds outside reached deadly levels. How long will this last? Nina shouted over the storm's roar. Sira held up fingers. Hours, not days. They could wait it out, but the temperature was dropping fast. Even with their heating unit running at full capacity and their bodies pressed close, the cold was becoming dangerous. Marcus's lips were turning blue, and Nina's hands shook with more than just fear. Sira looked alarmed. She began singing that same haunting melody she'd used to calm the predator. But this time, the song seemed to resonate with the ice around them. The walls of their shelter began to glow softly, and impossibly, the temperature rose several degrees. Remarkable, Marcus breathed through chattering teeth. Is she manipulating the ice's molecular structure? Creating a thermogenic reaction? Sira's song continued, but Jace could see the strain in her face. Whatever she was doing, it was costing her. He pulled her closer, lending his warmth, his presence, whatever strength he could offer. When the storm finally passed and Sira's song faded, she collapsed against Jace, exhausted. He held her through her shivers, murmuring reassurances in English that she couldn't understand, but seemed to find comforting anyway. You saved us, he told her. Again. She looked up at him with those remarkable violet eyes and spoke in careful, halting English. I keep ... J-A-C-E ... Safe. His heart stopped. You've been learning English? She nodded shyly, then spoke in Keltharian to Marcus, who'd been working with her on linguistics. Marcus's face lit up. She says she's been studying my tablet at night, learning our language because she wants to talk to you properly. Specifically to you, Jace. Jace cupped Sira's face in his hands. You are the most extraordinary person I've ever met. Extraordinary, Sira repeated carefully, as if memorizing the word. Jace is ... extraordinary. Nina laughed. Oh, you two are hopeless. Come on, let's move before another storm hits. The third day brought them within sight of their goal, a cluster of structures built into the mountainside, clearly artificial despite millennia of ice accumulation. The relay station. But it also brought danger. They were crossing a wide ice field when Sira suddenly screamed, a sound of pure terror. Jace spun to see a crack spreading across the ice beneath them, moving with horrifying speed. "Run!" he shouted. They scattered, racing toward solid ground. Jace made it to safety and turned to see Nia and Marcus scrambling up onto stable ice. But Sira, she was still in the middle of the field, frozen with fear as the ice spider-webbed around her feet. Any movement might trigger a complete collapse, plunging her into the frigid waters beneath. "Sira, don't move." Jace called out, but his words were useless. She was already paralyzed with terror. Without thinking, Jace ran back onto the unstable ice. Nina's shout of warning barely registered. All he could see was Sira's terrified face. All he could think was that he couldn't lose her. Not now, not after everything. He moved carefully, distributing his weight, approaching from an angle that seemed most stable. The ice groaned beneath him, an ominous sound that promised death in freezing waters. 10 meters. 5. "Jace," Sira whispered, her voice breaking. "I've got you," he promised. "I've got you." He reached her just as the ice gave way. His hand closed around her wrist, his other hand finding purchase on a jutting edge of ice. They hung there for an endless moment, suspended over darkness, the cold water below already reaching up with greedy fingers. Then Marcus was there, and Nina, forming a human chain that pulled them both to safety. They collapsed together on solid ground, gasping and shaking. Sira threw herself into Jace's arms, speaking rapidly in Keltharian, her voice thick with emotion. Marcus translated haltingly. "She says, she thought she'd lost you, that you were foolish to risk yourself, that she couldn't bear ... she." He paused, looking uncomfortable. "I think the gist is that she loves you, Jace." Sira pulled back, her violet eyes swimming with tears. In careful English, she repeated, "Love ... you." Jace kissed her, heedless of their audience, heedless of the cold, heedless of everything but the woman in his arms. "I love you too," he whispered against her lips. "My brave, beautiful Sira." She understood. Her joy was incandescent. That night, they reached the relay station. As they worked to clear the entrance, Jace couldn't stop watching Sira, couldn't stop marveling at the impossible turn his life had taken. He'd crashed on an alien planet, expecting to die. Instead, he'd found something he'd stopped believing in years ago. He'd found home.